Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be getting into chapter 3 and how the colonies are going to be developing. So we're going to get into the Carolinas and Pennsylvania and move on into some of the Southern society. So let's talk about what was going on with the Carolinas. The Carolinas are what we know as a restoration colony. They're going to be part of many restoration colonies, including New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. These are what we call proprietorships. What that means is where the land was given to one person who owns all of the land and rules it as they wished, as long as it's in accordance with English law. For the Carolinas, as they started out, the person who created the Carolinas was envisioning this duplicated form of European society with a feudal economic style. But due to the type of people who came and lived in the Carolinas at the start, it's not going to be incredibly successful, largely because it was poor families, runaway servants, Quakers, and they're not going to do well with that feudal style, and they're going to rebel against the taxes in the system. We will see South Carolina develop as well, and they're going to try to recreate the Barbados slave society style with a focus on the slave trade. And Barbados was known for being especially cruel, having a very especially cruel society. And in South Carolina, they're going to be known for the slave trade. Most especially, they're going to become the premier Native American slave exportation hub, where they're going to start human trafficking the Native Americans. But obviously, we know that's not going to go very well or last very long due to the pandemics of disease. And so we're going to see it become much more focused on the African slave trade. And South Carolina is going to begin rice cultivation and become much more involved in rice as a staple crop, which is one of the most cruel styles of slavery, with rice plantations, as the prevalence of disease like malaria is very high. Pennsylvania is similar, as it was a proprietorship. Of course, we know it was created by William Penn. Their chief export was wheat. If you don't remember what the Quakers were like, maybe take a moment to review your notes from last week. So as we think about the colonies, we need to keep in mind that they were set up and allowed to be created by the English government. And it wasn't out of the generosity of their own hearts. It wasn't to be kind to these colonists or to these English people. Instead, it was about making money. And that's really important for us to understand as we kind of move into the context of the later years. So this is all based upon this concept of mercantilism. Mercantilism is this concept of the ultimate goal of a country is self-sufficiency. And Britain absolutely was buying into that. They didn't want to have to trade or depend on other nations. They wanted to basically have everything under their own guidance, so that way they didn't have to pay for other countries' exportation fees and all that kind of stuff, and all of the costs could be passed on to the consumer. So that's why we're going to see this boom in colonization. And it's based upon this notion of mercantilism. And the notion here is that these colonies were set up to enrich England, to be a market for these British-made goods, to be a source of these raw materials and a producer of goods and materials to be sold to other nations, and for the ultimate benefit of Britain. So it's going to be this perspective that's going to lead to the Navigation Acts of 1651 that are going to last through 1751. As part of these, this is kind of what the rules are. No country could trade with the colonies unless they were shipped on colonial or English boats. Ships had to be manned by 3/4 English crew or colonial crew. The colonies could only export certain products only to England, and nearly all goods had to pass through the English marketplace. As you can imagine, this is going to spur a massive growth in shipbuilding and shipping as a totality. Most especially, we're seeing shipbuilding happening within the Northeast. But this is going to lead to tensions among colonists, as they're going to begin to hate these restrictions and start to try to circumvent them by smuggling goods. Most especially, we see this in Massachusetts, aka Massachusetts. And as a result, King Charles II is going to revoke the Massachusetts corporate charter and form it into the Dominion of New England under the control of the crown. All this will change, though, once the Glorious Revolution happens in 1688. In this instance, Parliament in Britain is going to stage a coup because they saw that the English king was too Catholic, and so they're going to replace him with a Protestant king and queen, King William and Queen Mary. But this is going to be a symbol of the growing power of Parliament. And we will see that this is going to lead us into this moment of salutary neglect, which we're going to be talking about a lot more later on. But that means this beneficial neglect, where the British are going to be much more focused on themselves and less focused on the colonies. And so we begin to see the sense of self-government happening within the colonies. But as I said, we'll get there later. So I just kind of want to explain to you how the Southern Society was working. So we're seeing very much two different styles of society beginning to emerge. The Southern Society is going to be one that's based upon this very much a single cash crop basis, where they're going to be focusing on a single crop that makes them the most money. For Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, that's going to be tobacco. For South Carolina and Georgia, that's going to be rice and indigo. What's interesting about the South is that we're going to see less towns developing. There will be still a few towns that will develop, but rather we're going to see plantations become much more dominant within the South, as they're going to almost act as their own towns because of this notion of this rural self-sufficiency. Many are going to have their own docks, as you can kind of see depicted here within this artist's rendering at the top. Where they could ship out their goods to the northern colonies or back to Britain. And this, of course, would make them self-sufficient, and so they wouldn't need to go into town. Society in the South is going to feature a lot of different European immigrants, the bulk of which are coming from Germany, Scotland, and Ireland. In terms of social stratification, men are going to be largely divided into three groups. Small farmers, who will be the majority of the Southern population. Planters, who will be the small minority, but the ones who are going to control the economy and run these plantations, basically the aristocracy of the South. And then indentured servants and enslaved persons. Remember, of course, indentured servants were people who had traded their life of prison or poverty in Europe for temporary servitude, but many, of course, are going to continue to suffer hardship after release, which, of course, we saw kind of highlighted with Bacon's Rebellion. Women in this society are going to be stuck in these traditional roles that are very domestic, second class. They're going to, once they get married, they're going to lose all sense of autonomy. They have to bow to their husband's will. They're largely uneducated and without any legal or social rights. If you remember, when we talked about Bacon's Rebellion, indentured servitude is going to begin to start dying out. And we're going to see that planters are going to look for a more permanent solution to the problem of labor. And so they're going to turn to the African slave trade. To put this into context, in 1690, they did a census, and they found that there were 13,000 enslaved persons in the South. Just 60 years later, in 1750, there were 200,000 enslaved persons in the South. So you can just really see just how quickly this situation is going to grow. They're going to come to the Americas through the triangular trade system that's going to connect New England to the West Indies and to Africa. And they're going to come via the Middle Passage, which was where the voyage was from Africa to North America. And if you look here, you can just see the way that this whole situation was set up. They would come on these boats. You can see this depiction of a British slave ship named the Brooks, which is just going to show how these people are going to be packed in. And just the inhumanity, the degradation of the slave trade. Just to keep in mind, these people are going to be chained down to the floor. And they're going to be squished together with all these different people with little room to move, with like 8 inches above their heads. So they can't really sit up. They can't really move. And you can just imagine how scary of a situation this would be for these individuals, being forced onto these ships and sold to be in this situation where they're stuck next to people that they don't know, that might not speak the same language as them. And to have people who are sick and dying next to them, women who are giving birth in these very confined spaces, just how horrendous of a situation this is. And honestly, it's pretty surprising that just how few people actually ended up dying. It was about 14 to 20% is the best estimates of the death rate. But you can see in this middle passage just where the bulk of the slave trade is happening. And most of it is happening within the West Indies, and only 5% are going to be coming to the Americas. So you can see in this chart just how, when the time in terms of the slave trade was really picking up, you can see that the bulk of human trafficking was happening in the 1700s, with 6 million people being forced over into the Western Hemisphere. So we're going to see, really, it's going to be picking up in the 1700s, most especially. So on the next few slides, I've got some excerpts from the House of Burgesses Virginia slave laws. So you can find these on my PowerPoint. And what I want you guys to do is, there's 4 excerpts that I've got on here for you to read on your own. And what I want you to do is to answer these questions in your notes, in your in-class notes. And so that way we can talk about them when we come to class tomorrow. So what I want you to answer is, number 1, describe in one sentence what each of these 4 laws sought to do. So you're going to have 4 total sentences for that. 2, why would colonists want the children born of white men and enslaved women to be slaves? And then 3, how might these laws influence the self-identity of white residents of the colony, both rich and poor? So think about those 2 separately, about how would that influence the identity of white poor residents and white wealthy residents. What's the impact of this? Because it's really interesting to see, how does society shift? How does society change? And how do the governmental structures try to make sure that society is changing and creating this new class of individuals within society that is meant to differentiate the lowest rung of individuals within the American colonies, and the impact that that brings. So we will talk about these questions in class tomorrow. So make sure you write these in your notes, and we will chat through them. So I hope that you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys later.